Hello, welcome to the Linguistic Connection activity. This is a bridge activity with the topic of weather and seasons. It's presented by me, Adriana Guerrero. Okay, now we have some of the goals for this activity. So the students will build vocabulary connections between Spanish and English, and all the words or academic words that are related with weather and seasons. Then they will identify cognates and language patterns across both languages, English and Spanish. They will develop meta-linguistic awareness through cross-linguistic comparisons, and they will apply weather vocabulary, academic vocabulary in both languages through collaborative activities. Okay, now before we start with the actual activity and go deeper into explaining the activity, I want to provide a little bit of explanation of why I decided to use the bridge for this activity. So I have a question that I use for me. So why use a bridge to build cross-linguistic connections with the students? So first is an especially powerful strategy for learners at the very early stages of language development. And then the bridge is, according to oral and teaching for literacy, the bridge is part of the lesson and that helps the students to transfer the knowledge that they have in their first language to into the other language. Okay, and in some way they make those connections between the content and the knowledge or the background knowledge that they already have. And then the bridge connections pushes students to explore cross-linguistic links between two languages. So the idea is for them to really make those connections. And the bridge, in my opinion, is a perfect strategy to do it. Now, here is a description of the activity. So the activity is supposed to have a duration of between 10 and 15 minutes, is intended for second grade ESL or emerging bilingual students, which their first language is supposed to be Spanish. The subject is science vocabulary, and the main goal is to build academic vocabulary related with the weather and seasons. Some of the materials that are going to be needed are anchor chart paper, markers or color pencils for the students, weather pictures, and sticky notes. Okay, so let's go deep into this activity. So the first part of the lesson, the opening lesson, which is kind of like the warm up, is just focused on building academic oracy with the students. According to Teaching for Literacy, Lehman and World, they say that the students need to really build that confidence and bring all the background knowledge that they have and use it. How? Through discussions or collaboration with their peers. So the idea is just like use different sentence stems with the students that they can use either in English or in Spanish to talk about different words that are related with the weather or clima or the different seasons of the year, and they can just discuss and talk. It could be in either in English or in Spanish, and they can just like practice and practice talking. We want for them to really bring all that knowledge that they have, that background knowledge. So I have a little kind of like some words like hola, we're going to be weather detectives. We will discover how English and Spanish share many weather words. ¿Están listos? Ready? So let's do a brainstorm. And I have some of the sentence stems. So for example, un ejemplo de clima o del estado del tiempo es, so an example of the weather is, yo sé que la palabra blank está conectada con el clima porque so I know that the word blank is connected with the weather. Why? Or because. So it's just like let's build some uh, let's build some kind of like academic vocabulary, or let's bring them up, brainstorm all of those words that we know, and just like let's just talk about them, talk about those words. Okay, this is the first part. This is it, warm up part. Okay, now that the students already discussed and they practice with that academic oracy, now we are going to present some pictures. So we are going to bring some kind of like flashcards so we can present these pictures into our projector, and we want the students to start looking at the very all the similarities, or how the words between English and Spanish are related, or like kind of like pushing them to make some different connections. Okay, for example, the idea is to present it to the, like, I just have three examples. Of course, we can bring maybe two or three more, but the idea is just to present some, because the point here is that the students will kind of like complete this list of words by themselves. So we want them to work together, and as a whole group, we want to discuss all the different words, and we are going to create a bridge, so the actual anchor chart. But we want for them to see some of the similarities, or just to start looking at what are those um, connections that we can make between the two languages. So, for example, with the flashcards of temperature, we can see the word in English and the word in Spanish, and we are also adding how we can pronounce the words, so they can hear the pronunciation of the words in each one of the languages. So then we have precipitation or precipitación, and then we have tornado or tornado. So again, it's just with few, like it's just for the students to see, okay, to like use some visuals, because we can have some students that they don't really understand what we are saying or what we're talking about. So these pictures are going to support them into understanding the words, and then also they can look at how the word is reading and how the word is pronounced. Okay, now, before we start creating the actual bridge and the anchor chart with the bridge, I just wanted to include this kind of like visual, in which we explain that the bridge has two different parts. So the first one is when we build the actual anchor chart with the words, and it could be side by side, the vocabulary words side by side in English and Spanish. And then after we have that bridge, we are going to create those cross linguistic connections that we're going to push the students to make that meta linguistic connections, and we're going to focus on how both languages are connected, right? Okay, now this is the last part of the activity. We are ready, did the brainstorm, okay? We expose them to academic oracy. Then they discuss some other words using sentence stems, working with pairs. And now, well, they also were exposed to flashcards or pictures with the words and the pronunciation of the words. Okay, they were more kind of like familiar, and they were supposed to start making connections. And now, with this last part, we are going to create the actual bridge, in which we're going to put all the vocabulary words in English and in Spanish, and we're going to use these guided questions. As for example, what words sound similar? What do we notice about the endings? How can we use what we already know in English to learn Spanish? ¿Qué palabras suenan parecidas? ¿Qué notamos en las terminaciones de las palabras? ¿Y cómo podemos usar lo que ya sabemos en español para aprender inglés? So we're going to push the students to think, but they are going to be looking at the actual bridge that we already built. Okay, let's say we have the bridge, we have the anchor chart, and now after that, we're going to work in pairs to categorize the different words, okay, that are already in the bridge. And we can categorize those words into how into the way that the word sounds. So how sounds change between languages, the phonology area. We also can ask the students to find patterns in words, any suffixes, prefixes, roots in the words, which is morphology, and any rules for pronunciation or language conventions, where those language conventions are very unique to each one of the language, either English or Spanish. Okay. Okay, and here are some pictures with different anchor charts that we can use through the lesson. Of course, these are just examples. The idea is to create our very own in a classroom, and we're going to use the one that is side by side. Okay, the second one right here on the right. Okay, now this is the very last part of the activity. Let's say that we already built the bridge. We have the anchor chart with all the words in English, all the words in Spanish, okay, side by side. We're pushing the students to look at them to find any cognates or similarities between the words. And then we are going to add another anchor chart. And we're going to divide the anchor chart into three different categories. How the words are different in their sounds, any word patterns, and any kind of like rules for punctuation or language conventions or grammar between both languages. The idea here is to push the students to really reflect and make those cross-linguistic or meta-linguistic analysis and connections in between both languages. So for example, in phonology, like how sounds can change between languages. So using the word precipitation, in English we say precipitation, and it's kind of like this sound, a little bit of buzzing sound, and in Spanish we say precipitación. We don't use this, we use it s, okay? Is the S, not the s, okay? It's a different sound. And then if we go to the next category, into like word patterns, like what are those patterns that we can find between both languages or between both words? Using again the same word, precipitación or precipitation, we can find a suffix, sion or sion, okay? And we can push the students to really reflect, okay, we have this suffix into many different words as addition, subtraction, relation, um, obligation. See, and those words are cognates, and both are used. I mean, and that those suffixes are used in both languages. Okay, and then for the last part of the last category, we have syntax and grammar, and using, for example, the word temperature or la temperatura. How in Spanish we need to use an article before la temperatura, and in English we don't have to do it. We don't have to use it. So that's a very unique rule for the Spanish that is not used in English. Okay. Now I know that this is going to take more than 5 minutes, but the idea is to keep the bridge, okay? And maybe one day we can just go over any phonology or any uh, sounds differences between the words in English and Spanish. And then the next day we can find any patterns or word patterns. And then for the older day, we can make connections into rules for punctuation, right? We don't have to do everything in just one session or one lesson, but we can use these activities through through the week, for example, through any other days. Um, and the idea again is for the students to find the cognates and then look at the all the words and then divide, like really uh, help them to make those cross linguistic connections. And here is my conclusion. So basically, with this activity, we want for the students to work in collaboration with other students and to build connections between two languages. We want them to really create those cross linguistic connections, and we want them to either use the bridge, we want them to use translanguaging, we want them to use any meaningful connections between English and Spanish. They need to see how both languages have or share many different similarities, either in the way that the words are written, or the way that we pronounce the words, or the way that we organize or reading, right, for grammar. And we want them to really learn and to really use meta linguistic connections. Okay, so I hope that this activity helps the students and helps teachers. Okay, and here are some of the references that I use. And thank you for watching. Bye.